President Trump has called NAFTA, quote, the worst trade deal ever signed by the United States. But many people in Kansas have benefited from the free trade arrangement, which has led their senator, Republican Jerry Moran, to urge caution. As Senator Moran puts it, quote, I am concerned that withdrawing from the agreement will harm our farmers and ranchers and cost us jobs. We welcome Senator Moran now, coming to us from Capitol Hill. Welcome to the program, Senator. It's good to have you here.
Thanks so much.
So give us the perspective from Kansas. How much would withdrawing from NAFTA really hurt your state and the people in it?
Well, I think it's significant. Nothing wrong with trying to get a better trade agreement, to modernize, to update, to bring in technology. But if the actual withdrawal from NAFTA occurs, I think it's very damaging to the economy. The way I explained this during the tax debate, and I think the tax code changes, the tax reductions are helpful to a growing economy, but you have to have income in order to get the benefits of tax rate reductions. And if we lose our income in Kansas, the benefits of the tax code changes will be greatly diminished. And what I would say is that we're an export state. And you mentioned in the prelude to me that it was about agriculture, and that's absolutely true. I mean, Mexico, for example, is the #1 purchaser of agriculture commodities from the state of Kansas in the world. But we're also an airplane manufacturing state, an automobile manufacturing state, and how we do business and how we sell what we produce brings income to our state. And so we are urging caution. And I think there's been a belief on the part of some that American agriculture in particular is always going to be there, and no country could walk away from our market, from our ability to export to them. Well, unfortunately, there's significant competition.
And let me put this in a broader context that you know well, but not all of our viewers may, and that is this is not a particularly good time for this to happen to the farmers of America right now. We're going to put up a chart. You won't be able to see it, but you know the numbers, which shows basically net farm income. And it had peaked really back in 2013, up at more than $120 billion. It's down now to like $63 billion. It has really come down. So this is a particularly difficult time for farmers to take a reduction.
Absolutely. There is nothing easy about being a farmer ever, but it is especially difficult now. Commodity prices are low. Farm income, as your chart shows, significantly down. The way I would draw the picture for our viewers, you can drive across Kansas, and most of our towns have what we call a grain elevator, where grain is stored before it's sold someplace or exported. That grain is now, those elevators are full. The grain is piled on the ground. There has been little market and little movement in that grain, and so we're still trying to get rid of harvest that occurred a year ago, and we'll have harvest again this year. So our access to world markets, not just Mexico and Canada, but access to the world to export those agriculture commodities is how we earn a living.
Talking about the rest of the world, 11 countries, including Mexico and Canada, have just agreed to move forward on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Of course, the U.S. has pulled out of that. So given the situation right now, how could a NAFTA pullout exacerbate the fallout now that you're not even part of the TPP?
Well, I'm discouraged that we're not part of TPP, and you saw Canada announce the agreement this week in the absence of the United States. The administration has indicated they want to negotiate not multilateral agreements, but bilateral agreements between two countries, not multi-countries. And what I would do is, what I've done is encourage them to negotiate those agreements now. We need every market today. It's something that can't wait. And particularly in regard to TPP, real concern that leaves China in a better position than they otherwise would be. And I see them as our great competitor, and they don't play by the rules. So we need to make certain we don't make it easier for China to dominate the trade markets.
Also not easy right now. Let me turn to domestic politics, because it's a busy day for the Senate right now. Senator Schumer taking back his offer to fund the border wall. Have the negotiations on immigration now become more difficult?
Well, I think with the government running and the conversations that occurred, one of the things that probably isn't seen on the news is the number. I sat in the Senate this week, and after the vote was cast to reopen government to fund the federal expenditures, you look around the Senate floor, and there's just pockets, you know, a dozen senators having a conversation, 2 or 3 over here, 4 or 5 over here. The conversations are ongoing about finding a resolution to the issue of border security, enhanced border security, and certainty for DACA recipients. And so I'm not discouraged. I think particularly if the agreement would stay as a basic one, one related specifically to DACA individuals, and related to increasing the border so we don't have more problems in the future in which we have to deal with people like in a DACA circumstance down the road. I think if we stay with the basics, a bottom line agreement, I think it can be achieved. And I don't think that Senator Schumer's comments, there's no question but what we're going to have to deal with the border, because the goal is not just to pass a bill in the Senate. It's also to pass a bill in the House, and that bill has to be signed by the president.
So sitting there in the Senate, does the Senate come away from this most recent experience even more resolved not to shut down the government? I mean, has this changed the incentive at all? Because to those of us on the outside, it seems pretty obvious. Something's got to be done on the border, and something's got to be done for DACA. You know, and we can talk about exactly how much and how big's the breadbasket, but it seems pretty straightforward to us. What's the problem?
In the part that you describe as straightforward, something has to be done with DACA, something has to be done at the border. I think the vast majority, almost every member of the United States Senate can find themselves in that position. So again, I'm optimistic about that. What I would say is that this is a wake-up call for both parties. Republicans went down the shutdown path in regard to Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. It didn't work well. Democrats went down the path in regard to DACA. It didn't work well. It's a message and a reminder, first of all, that we need to do our appropriation bills in a timely way so this doesn't become a target of leverage. But secondly, extraneous materials, policy-related matters don't work. The leverage isn't there because the American people expect, as a bottom line, that Republicans and Democrats surely can work together well enough to fund the government.
So finally, Senator, give us an insight here. Can this be done by the Senate and the House alone, or do you need strong leadership out of the White House? Whether that is Mark Short or whether it's Mick Mulvaney, whether that's the president himself, can the Senate do it by themselves, or do you have to have some leadership there?
No, I think it's useful for the president, the administration, to give us an outline, a framework. Ultimately, the Senate will have to pass something. I think we'll all have in the back of our minds what would a president sign, what would a House of Representatives pass. So you can't divorce yourself from those other issues, but the Senate needs to do its work, and any kind of guidance, I think, is beneficial.
Senator, thank you so much for your time. Senator Jerry Moran, Republican of Kansas.
Thank you.